We have a true piece of Gibson history today. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today's tale starts with me helping my friend Steve Oumet find a circa 1972 through 75-ish gold top that has the vibe. He doesn't care if it's got a headstock repair. He plans on replacing the mini humbuckers for P90s, and he's shopping in that 3 to 5K range. And you might be familiar with some of his work within the Guitar Hero series or any video game that's heavily music-centered, so you know this thing's going to a good home. So if anybody has something that kind of matches that, please let us know. But I've been looking with him, and a dealer actually listed 3 1969 Les Pauls, and one of them I absolutely fell in love with. Because prior to today, honestly, the 69s never appealed to me. It was always the 1968 crown inlay typo that was the bucket list guitar. But I didn't realize there was a similar thing to the very first deluxe model. I definitely splurged a little bit to add this one to my collection. But all the way to us from London, let's see my new legacy piece. Oh, wow. That gold finish is so magnificent. Oh, it's got the smell too. You always know it's a true vintage guitar if it's got the smell, it's got the top carve, it's got the color, it's got the nylon saddles. But my friends, what makes this one so unique and made me want to buy it is look at this headstock. I had never realized that the very first run of Les Paul Deluxe had a unique headstock style to it. It doesn't have a Les Paul model silkscreen on it. They decided to put it only on the truss rod cover. So if you have this cover on a Deluxe, not only does it really look cool, but it's ultra rare. And the fact that this thing is so ridiculously clean made me go, you know what? Maybe I do want a 69 Deluxe in my collection because it's just beautiful. I love it. It's the introduction of the model. Just imagine what the guys were thinking as they were building this very early Deluxe. Now, I'm not saying it's the first one, but it's one of the earliest ones that featured the new mini humbuckers. But let's do a little bit of history in case you're not familiar. The Les Paul model that we know and love today was first introduced in 1952, as far as the main production run anyways, and that lasts all the way until about 1961-ish. Well, as far as the original Les Paul body shape anyways, they were still called Les Pauls until 1963. And that goes from the P90 version with the trapeze tailpiece, converting over into the wrap tail. Eventually we then get the ABR1 stop bar setup, and then the introduction of humbuckers with that, and then we get the burst colors. And alongside that, the Les Paul Custom, Juniors, Specials, etc. But after they were discontinued, they did not come back until 1968. So I already talked about the crown inlays. The reason why they have the SG crown came down to a typo. You can learn all about that in this episode. But after that, they got that corrected, and they were reissued kind of like a 1956 Les Paul. But in 1969, that is when so many changes start to happen to the Les Paul. Most things are seen historically as a bad thing. You get a big headstock. You get the volute coming in, you start to get the pancake bodies, your neck tenons start changing. But outside of how the guitar was constructed, they changed the pickups for that second year. You get the introduction of the mini humbuckers. So those actually came from the Epiphone lineup. So some guys say they were just kind of using them up. Honestly, I think they were just making them anyways and they thought they sounded good, so they would try it in a new Les Paul. So when you're trying to evaluate a 1968 or 69 Les Paul, how much it's worth really depends on our specs. So this guy right here, one of the earliest Deluxe, it's quite clear we've got the giant headstock, which was new at this time. We've got the also then new 3-piece mahogany neck. However, you will notice that this one is pre-volute. Gotta look really good because the very earliest volutes are very tiny. Hopefully I'm not sounding convoluted, but I would say this is a non-voluted example. But we do not have the pancake body, but obviously we do have the mini humbuckers. And I would expect to see a transitional neck tenon in this, but we're gonna find out a little bit later on today. But the difference between a true 69 Deluxe and one of the later ones comes down to really small, minute details. Is it worth paying twice as much for one if you're just a player? Probably not. That's why they never really spoke to me. Now, when it comes to the Les Paul Deluxe model itself, the most expensive ones are the first year examples because they have slightly different body constructions like we were just talking about. Next up would be the 70s sparkle tops like the red and blue ones that I've documented on the show. And then the other one that's really cool to me anyways are the 72s because they have the Gibson embossed mini humbuckers. It's just a fun little thing. but this thing is just so ridiculously clean for its age. Like, it's got some wear and tear. It's got some finish checking. It's not perfect. In fact, I'm kind of glad it's not perfect because I was kind of scared it might be a fake at first until I did more research into the early deluxe. And that's why I also wanted to share this with everyone. So you're probably wondering, how does a store get 369 gold tops at the same time? Apparently, this collector's birth year was 1969, so he specifically collected these. And unfortunately, he has passed away. So his family used that shop to help liquidate his collection. The other two had P90 pickups, so if you're interested in them, they're around 20,000 bucks. But it's all because of this weird headstock that I said, yeah, give me the mini humbuckers, even though I would normally prefer P90s. But not only do I get the guitar, you get the awesome 6869 orange interior case. I love these things. It's mainly just the interior color that's different, but look at that. We've got the hang tag for this thing. Let's see, is it actually filled out? Nope, we still have that card, which if you have that page in this booklet, they're worth about twice as much. But the exterior of this case is really clean too. But to learn more about this monumental find, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs before getting to that playing demo. What an absolute treat, my friends. I'm ecstatic to do this. All right, so our very early mini humbuckers, this is what they would look like. Not too different on the top as compared to the later 70s. So here's what we've got going on the backside. Still has our patent number on it, and our bridge pickup is very similar as far as these markings go. But as far as our pickup readings, 7.15 for their bridge, neck position, 6.98, and just for fun, our middle, 3.53. However, what's different is our routes. When you first get into the cavity, you have this aluminum block down here, and it has random letters on it. Now this one's not too fascinating, but it's also secured down by 2 screws. They're large and black. Now this bar is stuck in there, so I'm not going to force it out, but our neck pickup was a little bit different. It actually has a readable branding on it. So I was trying to figure it out. R-E-Y-N-O-L-L, Reynolds aluminum? But then it hit me. This is Reynolds aluminum. You know, the very famous aluminum foil brand? Gibson used their aluminum to create these awesome mini humbucker blocks. And on top of that, they're very thick, especially into comparison to what Gibson uses today for their mini humbuckers. But before we even got there, I'm not sure if these are stock from the factory or not, but we've got some sponges here. I would imagine they were added later on, because usually vintage foam has compressed and deteriorated more than this, but I could be wrong on that. But as expected, we have a transitional neck tenon, and then you can see the routes underneath the base plate. So about what I was expecting. As far as our construction goes, you can see our maple top right here, joining onto the mahogany body. Doesn't look like we have any figuring within that wood, but that's okay. That got me thinking though, how many pieces is this top? If you get it in the light just right, it's not ever apparent, but you can see there's a seam line that lines up with this, and then there's another seam line right here, so it is at least a 3-piece top. But you would have never been able to tell that from new. It takes some age to show those. In the late 60s, Gibson was all about using these nylon saddles. It's kind of a signature spec of these guys, so I'm glad to have one of these in my collection. And we can see our foundry mark as well as the Gibson patent number. And our tailpiece has definitely seen better days. It's got a lot of pitting and wear to our coating. However, it is lightweight aluminum. This is just such phenomenal condition though for 69. It's not perfect. It's got finish checking all over it. As you can see, there's a few areas where it broke the clear coat, so it started the greening effect. There's like some bronze in the gold powder, so that's why it turns green, because it oxidizes when it touches the air. But check out our sweet tan lines on this beauty. That's why this looks like such a dark golden hue, is because the clear coat has ambered over quite considerably. You see how dark it is? But there's a little bit of rubbing right here where you can see the original color of the binding. It's not completely rubbed through, it looks worse in photos. But since the bridge and tailpiece shielded those areas, including our pick guard, we can see some of the original gold top color. It's not that much brighter, but that's a very similar phenomenon as the bursts get. So sometimes if you take their pick guards off, you see like a little bit of red underneath it. Here's a look at this pick guard. It is beautifully aged from the sun. Looking pretty nice. But we've got that beautiful belly on this, and then we've got our controls. We've got volume, tone, and tone. So those appear to be original. We've got our thumb bleeders, and not too much else to add for our body. But moving on from our body, we've got our mahogany neck with our rosewood fretboard. We are still on the original frets for this example. Now you might say, you sure about that, Trogly? I don't see any fret nibs on that. You gotta remember, the vintage ones are very, very tiny. The modern day Gibson USA ones are definitely way over exaggerated. And you can definitely tell these frets have been worked on in the past as far as level recrowns. So some areas, like, you can just barely see them at all, or they've just naturally been worn off. We've also got fingernail divoting wear in it, but that's pretty common to find on these old guitars. We could level recrown it out, but I think it's good enough just as is. Nice medium color on this fretboard. There was just one thing I noticed on this. Something with this inlay. I don't know if it's been replaced, or if it's just shrunk, or it was shoddily installed by the factory, but it definitely has more room on either side. So there's definitely some sort of a story there. But our bone nut measures 1.72 inches. That increases to 2.06 by the 12th. First fret neck depth, 0.86, and 1 by the 12th. Here it is at the first fret and the 12th fret, perfectly rounded. It kind of reminds me of some Melody Maker necks, how it starts off rather thin feeling, but then the further up you go, it actually almost becomes a rounded R7 baseball bat up here. In comparison to feel, it's definitely not that big, but it chunks up a bit. But now our oh so beautiful headstock. It's so clean. Sometimes the Les Paul model silkscreens just wear off over time, and that's what I thought this was at first until I looked at that truss rod cover, but you can definitely tell. There is no evidence of that. So this is just absolutely fantastic to me. I love it. I'd never seen it before, but now that I have seen it, I wish all Deluxe were like that. The small script works great, but it's a 3-ply truss rod cover. The back is completely black. And miraculously, we still have the original tuners. That's the problem with these early Deluxe. They always get reamed out for Grovers or modern day Klusons, but these still have the push and bushing style, which I love the look of. They might not function that good anymore, but thankfully we have modern day replacement options that don't include reaming out your headstock. And it looks like we've got the pantograph logo. That's another 69 feature. Unfortunately, if you don't care for these guitars too well, this whole logo can literally just fall off. But this one has been miraculously maintained. But now we've got some more fun inside cavity shots. So everything's looking untouched in here to me, and our pot codes are pretty cool. They read 1376852, so that means the 52nd week of 1968. Typically you go by pot codes as to what the guitar is, but as far as the specs go, we know that this thing wasn't made until early 69. And not even the earliest 69s that we know, because those things still had P90s for a while. Because our serial numbers really don't help us too much in this era. And you also have to remember the pots were made before the guitars. But sometimes that's just the best we have to go. But we can see our B marking, and all of our route is looking good here. Same thing is true with our toggle switch. This is a true surviving example. Here's a look at our brown backplates. Now the control cavity one. Modern day Gibson gets a lot of flack for having a little bit too much of a ledge routed out, but you can see it's kind of even true even back in the 60s, so maybe we're just now noticing it. This toggle switch cavity route is very bad on that lip. Look at the back on this thing. It's got a little bit of buckle worming. It wasn't completely babied, but nothing totally aggressive, as evidenced by still having the plastic output jack plate. But you've got a strap button down here. Thankfully, no madmen have ever tried moving that. That's a problem with these 60s Les Pauls for some reason. And we've got some beautiful finish checking around the edges. But here we can see our thick binding in the cutaway. No longer a nice 50s thin cutaway, but nice wood grain on the edge in combination to our light aging. Very nice. Moving up the neck, the 3 pieces hide pretty well. You really have to look at it right here to start to see the 3 pieces, and then you got the 2 additional wings when you get to your headstock. But here's another viewing angle of our volute area. But yes, after putting the strings back on this thing, these tuners desperately need replaced and or at least lubricated. They are so stiff to turn. There's a reason why people replace them. But our serial number on this one is 811680. Of course, it's very important to blacklight vintage guitars to see if there's been any finish touch-ups, and it also kind of helps you show the nicks and dings off. So as far as actual finish wear, that was just like a small ding where a small area was exposed and caused the greening, but as far as an actual ding in the finish, it's pretty much just like right there. Our knobs are glowing the way I would expect to see, as are our plastics, nice and even. Our headstock is nice and even. There is a rather large ding right there on the headstock, but thankfully it's like right in line with the strings, so it's not overly noticeable. And then we do have a little bit of chipping along the edges. The back's looking nice and uniform too. It glows a little bit differently right there. Could be there was a sticker on there at one point in time, or there could be a sweat absorption, something that was in the case that slightly discolored the finish. But personally, I'm not too worried about that with everything else. Everything looks as expected over here, as well as on this side. Now this is where you normally see sweat absorption and whatnot, but this neck is insanely clean for this vintage. We don't even have the edge wear that you normally see. Lovingly cared for. And no breaks, cracks, or repairs here. Wow, I got lucky on this one. So now that we've torn it all apart, I believe it to be about 99% original. I questioned this screw because it's a domed one. However, I'm not as familiar with 60s Les Paul mounting screws, so I could be wrong on that. And the bottom truss rod cover screw, it looks slightly different in style, and that one is sank in crooked. I'm not sure if it just came like that from the factory or if somebody lost that at one point in time and had to replace it. And then we got that weird inlay thing, but it matches everything else, so I doubt it was replaced unless it was the same material and it's just aged the same. So there we go, our beautiful late 60s Les Paul Deluxe. How much does it weigh? 9 pounds, 4.9 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug this thing in, and hear how it sounds. So as far as clean tones go, really like that neck position. The bridge is extra bright. You can tame that a bit with the tone controls. But I really like that combination middle position. So pretty decent tones, but so far, I don't know, this guitar doesn't really inspire me to play anything necessarily. It feels very stiff. I mean, I hate that this falls into the category of the good ones got played and the bad ones got left in the case to become collector's editions. I think this one just needs a bit of a setup. The frets are very worn on it. They don't feel the best. And these tuners, they've gotta go. But let's get some dirt on it. So there we go, a 1969 first year, very early iteration Les Paul Deluxe. What are my final thoughts on it? Yeah, it's not my favorite guitar in the world, but this was more so a collection piece to help me tell the history of the Les Paul when I finally get my museum up and running. So it'll do me well for that because this thing was very meticulously cared for. It does the Who stuff very well, I just don't know very much from them as far as playing it on guitar, but it definitely feels rather stiff as is. The Deluxe might be the least popular version of the Les Paul, but this was just such a fascinating time for Gibson. Norlin had just recently purchased them, they were trying to make some changes to make the company a little bit more profitable. I mean, looking back on it through history's time lens, they changed a lot of stuff they probably shouldn't have as far as wanting 50s historic specs, but the 70s and 80s birthed some really cool stuff, and it couldn't have happened had we not experimented a little bit. So that's why this is a cool guitar. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.